Welcome back. This is Jared. It's Not Aliens. And we have two special guests today. This is going to be Daniel Duke and Teresa Duke. And it's amazing that they grew up with stories of lost outlaw treasures. They have a very famous great-great-grandfather, Jesse James. And for more than 2 decades, specifically, Daniel has researched historical records to solve the mysteries surrounding his family's past. He lives in Texas. Teresa has also spent 20 years investigating the truth about their great-great-grandfather, Jesse James, including handwriting analysis, genealogical histories, and assisting her mother compiling materials for 3 books on Jesse James, also living in Texas. And without me saying anything that gets us banned off of YouTube, welcome to the show. How are you both?
Thank you. We're honored.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, this is really exciting for me. This is something that, and I only said that because at Not Aliens at my website, we have a private member area, so we can get into all sorts of specifics, and I can even ask you, like, how frustrating has some of this research been, and you can actually tell me what you think without
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. So then at the same time, then there's co-hosting and conflict radio and all of it. And I know we got a chance to chat beforehand, and I think I spent more time me telling about myself. So a lot of people think that there's just this magic connection, or that we all know each other somehow in the background in the world of research and history and archaeology. And that is impossible. So in the short time that we talked off air, now that we're on, and and I think people should get the books that you've written. So without giving away the books themselves, I do want to focus on the overall topics. And I'm going to start with this. My grandfather was a tank commander in World War II. He landed in a tank at D-Day, and was in a tank through Belgium and Holland and battled the Bulge, and was in a tank all the way through to Berlin. And and as a child, I became fascinated from 2nd grade on with history. So for me, my drop point was my grandfather, who is just ridiculous and incredible in so many ways. And so from there, I went backwards. Of course, who in my family, we grew up watching stuff like John Wayne and Paint Your Wagon. And then worse, I'm in Minnesota. So here comes Northfield, and having relatives in the 1st Minnesota, and the whole conversation with that. So for me, unlike a lot of people's interests, it naturally gravitates towards your very own great-great-grandfather. It can't not.
I love it. I love the connection of the dots.
So yeah, and for you guys, and I bring up my grandfather because I never got tired from the minute I could physically hang out at his house in St. Paul. For me, I had a lifelong history from the minute I could ask questions from 5-6 years old on, and those questions became more adultish about how you manage the war and everything else. But when you have a family that has such an incredible and long history within influencing, I think, American culture, and not to mention, the Civil War itself, I just have some appreciation of what it would be like to grow up in a house with that kind of history, and hearing it from this is why I'm prefacing the question. What was it like to hear these things? What kind of impression did it made over both your entire lives? How's that for a short first question?
Wow. Well, with, growing up hearing it, there was a lot of different ways it affected us. We started off living in Austin, in the city. And then when we were children, our parents moved out to the country, and it was a whole different atmosphere. Completely different culture, and it was a lot wilder in ways than the city was. And we the stories about Jesse kind of hit home a little closer, or hit closer to home when we were out in the country. And then I started getting a little wild when I was in high school or junior high and high school, and it affected me in that way, in a negative way, just because I had a wrong impression of what Jesse actually was. I was I started thinking it was a good thing to be an outlaw, and then you find out later after years of research and maturity, a little more maturity, you find out he didn't do it for fun. It was kind of thrust on him, and there were a lot of deeper reasons behind why they did what they did. I hope that's a good answer. That's a tough question to answer, and one I could probably write chapters on that question alone.
There was one giggling voice in the background that I want to hear her opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it kind of like Danny, as I was growing up, I was little, I didn't really fully comprehend, the extent of what it meant. I knew he was a famous bank robber, and that's really all I knew, and so I'd go to school and I'd tell my friends, hey, I'm related to Jesse James. And, everyone was like, oh, that's so cool. But as I grew older, I could appreciate more when I, read the history and everything that that they went through, not just the gang, but just the times they were living in. And it just kind of made me appreciate more what they went through, and just the struggles and the rebellions that were going on. And it's something that I just always kind of looked at with awe. I don't think I've ever been ashamed of it, but more like just wow, I I was always fascinated by the history of it.
Yeah, and not to jump too far ahead, but of the Jesse James gang, of the associates involved, have you talked to other relatives?
We've talked to a few in the past, even including some of the Ford relatives, and they had grown up their entire lives hearing the same story, that the Fords didn't kill Jesse James, and that they were actually friends with him. But I don't. I think they of course they were hungry for something like that. They were very eager to jump on that wagon, just because being related to people known in history as dirty little cowards can't be a good thing to be. I'm
No.
sure that's something they'd want to hide. So
it's not like they don't want to embrace the story, but then there's somewhere in the middle, there's the truth, which
yes,
sends you guys looking for 2 decades.
exactly.
That at what point do you get re-excited, or I don't know if that's it. What does it feel like to explore this history like it's a reality, like it's a present mystery? What's it like?
It's very exciting, frustrating, and exciting. You come up with every answer you find leads to something else, and it's almost like a spider web overlapping other webs in history. And when you do find some connections, it's amazing. It's just like you want to celebrate and run around and tell the world, but then you sit down and think about it, and it just leads to 20 more questions.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more work. It's fun work, but sometimes it'd be nice to just have all the answers instantly and be done with it. But
did you tag team back and forth then?
Oh,
Teresa? Yeah. Did you just yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just always like, my mom started the research and we were there to help her with it. And when she passed away, me and Danny just made a vow to continue the research. And, just when we would find little things, like I would reach out and say, hey, Danny, look what I found, or he would do the same. And I don't know, it's just kind of like that. It's just, I never get bored with finding more information on it. It's just, it's exciting. And it leads us down so many rabbit holes. Like you can just go down so many that I just don't know if this will ever truly end. Which I'm okay with because it's fun.
Oh, yeah, it's got to be, because there's no, amount of actual history that we're for the amount of history that's left out in order to get through us, you know, your 18 years of schooling in our system. It so much. I was shocked at what my own daughter's the extent of what she was taught for World War II. It just
Yeah.
that was not a good place for me to start. And then they got into the geopolitics of the Revolutionary War in a way where I guess I wish they would have brought it up, but they got so far into it that it made me hate history, and that's an accomplishment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in helping her work out uh, some of the things that they were trying to study, it was like, okay, there's no central balance. And then yet we have all these channels, History Channel, Discovery Channel, all these biography, international biography. We have so many things on television where people are obsessed and love history. And once you start looking at it, the truth always seems stranger than fiction, right?
Oh yes.
That's very true.
So
In our case, we definitely feel like that's the truth.
oh, so what happens when you guys both find things as you're looking, you're kind of, you know, you're tennis courting, you know, you're hitting this ball back and forth. What's it like when you get together with other relatives or you start finding new things? I mean, how is the reaction within the family?
Our
Well,
family,
we
I'll
have
let
some
Teresa.
family. It's kind of split. Like we have some family members who they're like us. They've heard it their entire lives. And then we have other family who claim they never heard it. And we're like, what are you talking about? You know, it's like, are you sure we're all from the same family?
But then some of those family members who claimed they never heard it, especially the more outspoken ones, we later found they had heard it and they were hiding it.
Yeah.
That was usually, it was a different branch of the family. And one lady, for example, I'll just say her first name. I don't want to. She's passed away, but I don't. Her name
Sure.
was May, and she was an elderly lady. She was a school teacher in a small Texas town, and her husband was the local preacher. And she had over 200 letters from Jesse, and she burned them.
Yeah.
Burned over
Oh,
letters. She didn't burn all of the stuff, but she burned at least half of what she had.
why?
And she didn't want anybody else ever knowing. And they were ashamed to have been, she was ashamed to have been related to an outlaw. And he was her grandfather. And the funny thing is, she was ashamed to have been related to him. But her and her husband, you know, she was a small town teacher. He was the preacher. And they were very wealthy. They had land all over the place that was given to them by Jesse. Their parents were her parents were children of Jesse, and he gave all of his children a farm, you know, farms and homes, and the land that he gave her parents was covered with oil. So she wasn't too ashamed to spend the money, but she just didn't want to take the name.
Oh boy.
And for some reason, I guess if your husband's a preacher in a small town and the gossiping people, and plus it was a different culture in those days. And I do realize people were ashamed at the idea of being related or descended from an outlaw. But it was just, it was a shame that she burned all the letters. I mean, that's literally just destroying history.
It is. It is. Welcome to a number of other organizations that came to the New World with conquistadors. Thank you.
Yes.
I can think of a library that we'd all like to go in Italy, but
Oh, yes.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
I was actually joking.
Definitely.
Teresa and I talk about that all the time.
do you?
Yeah, we'd love to somehow break in and just look. So
Well, I was just having this conversation with Mary Joyce, and I've had it with my friends who are archaeologists. It's like just even in the field of journalism or research as an archaeologist, it should be like class 101. Well, if I want to do research or look at a documentation of something, how do I get access to it? Well, one, don't burn it. Two, it has to be in some digital or format where, okay, well, this university, there has to be some catalog that says, well, I'm now doing research in this one area of Egypt. And that had Oxford, Harvard, and Yale or MIT, or pick a dozen schools, and they all excavated for 74 years, and the 10-year window you're looking for, all that research is between 6 colleges, and they're either in writing or they're in physical artifacts that are stored away, like Ark of the Covenant, Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark style. And that's the issue, is that you get to a place like the Vatican and just, how do you get a library card?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no touchy, and that's the problem. It's our history. It's our entire world's history. And I get into that a lot. A lot of people have heard me talk about it, that we have premonitions, or what really comes down to what's likely stored genetic memory, where a lot of people are always thinking that they're somebody famous, that they were always, many people think of themselves as Cleopatra. That, by the way, I do studio, and everyone's used to this, but I have the main rail yards 20 feet from my studio, so that makes sense for recording.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, I like that.
Wow.
It's nice background noise when you're talking about Jesse James. So
yes, so
by.
we could digress into one of those stories, and we've already brought the Vatican in, and we can talk Templars soon. So it's so at the by the way, which one of you gets whom into Templars? How does that happen?
I was the one who wrote the book with the Templars. It was Jesse James and the Lost Templar Treasure.
See, not having talked to both of you, it almost occurs to me that because one of my pre-questions to even getting to that was, it seems like you guys really get along, and I think that's phenomenal. And I wondered how much collaboration is going on between the two of you, and that you actually, as siblings, enjoy each other's company. It's awesome.
Yeah. I think, to be honest with you, I think it's just we both have a common goal, and it was to keep our mother's research going, and it just kind of fueled our collaboration to just get it out there and do what we can and live up to finding more research in her name.
And then at some point, though, it becomes your own animal. It has to. At what point did you ever look at it and say, "This is our"? It's not that it's in honor of Mom, but at the same time, at what point does it really turn into something that you guys both? Does it just naturally turn into something you both love?
Oh yeah. I'm so fascinated with it. Just everything that Jesse James alone, just the reputation of Jesse James was fascinating, but I think more for me, and I think I could speak for Danny too, it's all the little rabbit holes that we've been taking down that keeps us going. It's just this fascinating information.
Is there one that you can think of that didn't make any books that you're just fascinated by?
Yes.
Yes. No.
Is that one you can talk about?
Well, I can say a little about one of them. I used to take our mother down to the Texas State Archives in Austin, and we would do this regularly, once or twice a week. And as we kept going further, she came out with her first article, which before her first book, and it was published in Texas Monthly Magazine. And then it was between that and the time her first book came out. We noticed two gentlemen, an older gentleman and a younger man, and they were always there and constantly watching us. And, I thought, okay, it's just, two strange guys, don't pay attention to it. And, Austin's, their motto is keep Austin weird. And that's what I expect every time I go to Austin. So we're in the archives, and one day the librarian told us, and I've never told anybody this one before, but the librarian he's passed away. His name was David Baskins. And he said, don't sign in. We got to know him real well because we were there all the time. And Mom said, why not? And he said, they're watching. That's all he said. And he wouldn't say any more. And I thought that's very odd. And, we didn't know what to say. So it wasn't that day, but the next time we visited, which was just later that week, these two men who had been watching us walked over, introduced themselves. One of them was a well-known JFK researcher by the name of Jay Harrison, and he's passed away also. And the other one told us he was a house painter, and that's all he said. He said, I paint houses, and that was it. And they told us, they just warned us politely not to mention any names that dealt with a certain power structure. And we thought, okay, they said, you can prove who your grandfather was, just don't mention any names that deal with the power structure. And our mom and I both looked at them and said, well, who's the power structure? And they just grinned and said, you'll find out. And nobody ever told us. That was the last we heard of that. And then he wanted to give us a tour. And after giving us a warning like that, we just thought, why would we go to a cemetery alone with you? And that's what he wanted us to. Yeah. So,
No.
so later I find out the guy who claimed he was a house painter was a researcher for the Texas State Bar. And he had his photo on the Texas State Bar's website. And then now I can't find any trace of the photo. But I don't want to say too much because I still worry about that sometimes. But later down the road, much later down the road, I watched the mob movie that recently came out, about Jimmy Hoffa.
Okay.
What was the name of that movie? I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a real good movie, long movie. I think, anyway, it was about Jimmy Hoffa. And one of the killers in the movie would say, I paint houses. And that reminded me of the warning we got. And the man said he was a house painter. And I don't know if that's what he meant, but it just gave me chills. So
that's so interesting.
They scare you, but they also, they just egg you on and want you to dig deeper. Or
I don't get that, right?
Yeah. And I love it. It's spooky, but at the same time, life would be so boring without it. So in a strange way.
So that was that you haven't talked about before.
No, I've never mentioned that before.
That's so fascinating, because then did they stick around? At the time, did you keep seeing?
We saw them a few more times. And every time we saw them was when we were walking out of the archives, going back to the vehicle, and we would see them going to their vehicle.
Oh, that's odd.
And that was all we saw. I don't know if they were following us or I don't know what they were doing, but they were always around. And then for years later, my mother kept getting emails from a man who claimed he was one of those men, but he would never use his name, and the email was hard to trace it. And the email was just part of the email was Smoking Man. That's what he called himself. And he would send us like articles. Well, he would tell mom like, this guy's going to get in trouble for this. And a year later, you'd see that guy's name on the news in trouble for, it was like some religious leader getting busted for strange things. But it was just weird. It's like, how does he know all this? And then why would he even send that to us? It was just strange stuff like that throughout the years that intertwined with all the Jesse James research.
Did stuff happen to either of you separately?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll let Teresa go with that one.
Well, I don't really want to go into detail, but things did happen. Still happen.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like put the lotion in the bucket sort of guys?
Not that weird.
Okay,
Not
good.
yet.
Nobody wants you to come to the trunk of a car and look at their moth collection?
Yeah. Not yet, at least.
I've never done a reference like that in an interview before, so that's also a first. Thanks, guys. It's your fault I got dark. It's your fault.
That was funny. Oh, that was good.
So that's as much as you'll say as far as it's gotten interesting. I guess there's been watchers on your side of the fence also then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What an odd thing to be watching about. Where does from where did you not switch, but where did between the Jesse stories and the history and the reality and the research, where did the Templar thing come up for you?
Oh boy, that let's see. Mom, we all, that's now I'm getting tongue tied. Included let's see, among all the items that were passed down through the family, photos, family photos and things like that from Jesse, was also a copy of a treasure map. And I remember my great aunt handed that to Mom, and it, just passed it on to Mom. It was a treasure map, and it just had these strange designs on it, geometric designs, and a couple of simple codes that were easy enough to break. But all it was number substituting letters, and if you could, you just played with that, you could figure it out real quick, like so much silver buried here, so much gold buried here, and then he even buried greenbacks in another spot. But the problem with that was there was no topographic references at all, and no physical references as to where that treasure was. So, and the family for generations had talked about the treasure. They were all looking for it. Nobody had found it, allegedly. And so that's what got me into the treasure side of it. And all of us, we were all interested in it, but I started going as deep as I could. I wanted to find it. And that led down a lot of rabbit holes, but it seemed like Freemasons were coming out of the woodwork, around, we'd never really met that many Freemasons until Mom started coming out with her books. And there were several old gentlemen who were Freemasons, and they befriended us. And one, for example, was George Roaming, and he started telling us a lot about the treasures. And he when he was a child, Jesse was an old man, and Jesse hired George to help him bury 700 bars of gold, each one weighing approximately 15 pounds each. And he said he was sworn to secrecy, and before he died, and it sounds like a typical treasure story, before he died in El Paso, he drew the map on a piece of brown grocery bag paper, manila paper. He drew the map on it and told us exactly where it was. We went to look for it and found out it's under a lake near Fort Hood. So, it's either on the boundary of Fort Hood or on Fort Hood itself. And we decided, no, we're not going to break into a military reservation and try to recover a treasure. That doesn't sound like a good idea any way you look at it.
No, I see you guys both winking through the phone right now.
Yeah. I'm kind of going a long way around that back to the Templar. I started researching. I thought, okay, why, Jesse, just that one treasure legend alone, Jesse and the gang never robbed that much gold. I mean, if you add up all their robberies, it wouldn't have amounted to 700 bars of gold, weighing 15 pounds each. That's a lot of gold. And that was just one of the treasure legends involving him. And then around, so I'm trying to, let's see. And I'm trying to keep from getting too long-winded. I don't want to take up all your time, but
no, this is the best part. We have two things to do for everyone listening. One is general introductions and get to know you. This doesn't have to be, like I said, a one-time thing. The reality is that the subjects are so broad, and the benefit of doing these kind of podcasts and why people are such fans and they download it by the thousands is because we get into details that, the average radio show interview is, I feel like it's the following. Oh, it looks like we got you at home. Oh, you got a dog. Oh yeah, that's funny. I know your second cousin. That's great. Thanks for being on. You're someone famous. That's
yeah, that's true.
Like that's the whole thing. Brady Bunch, Jesse James, good to see you. Goodbye. That's that's like, hope to have you back on. Never. It's like, what was that?
That's true.
That's like,
that's perfect. Yes.
That's the depth of, I think, most television shows. And I think that's why podcasting in general, philosophically speaking, and for no one else's benefit but mine, but just to hear myself talk, it's the time that you have to explain this. And this is the point. It's like the general topics, whether we just stuck with, there's like, I have 8 million questions on Jesse James and surrounding other artifacts and stuff. And then here we have this other mystery. So please continue and take as much time as you want.
All right, thanks. Well, okay, from George, George Roaming, he was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, and he had given us the map told us the story of the gold. That brought up a lot of questions. And, you know, you can't take it for face value just because he's a nice old guy. You know, we didn't have any reason to not believe him, but it was just, you know, it seemed like a wild story. But then former Attorney General of Texas, Wagner Carr, who was also involved with the Warren Commission investigating the assassination of JFK, he was also interested in Jesse James, and he called our mother, and he would talk to her a lot, and they would, you know, call him back and forth. And one day he had his driver come out and show my mother and I where 3 large treasures had been that had been recovered. And I thought, oh my God, you know, you've got George telling us one story, and then Wagner Carr, the former Attorney General for the state of Texas, telling us 3 other locations where they'd been recovered. And around that time, I'd also found a template that was referred to a lot of the treasure hunting community, you know, and treasure hunting community, that's a whole nother ball of wax. Most of that you take with a grain of salt, but every once in a while, something would pop up, and they had this map, you know, they kept referring to the KGC, which was just, you know, and it was the Knights of the Golden Circle, who were a secret society in the Civil War. They were a Confederate secret society, and their whole job during the Civil War was to harass Union troops and try to slow their movements and stop them. They'd blow up train tracks, bridges, things like that. Well, after the Civil War, the Knights of the Golden Circle supposedly changed their goals to getting as much money as they could any way they could to try to refund a second Civil War. And that spawned a lot of treasure legends that keep on to this day. But they had this map that they supposedly used. And I wasn't sure if this template worked or not. And I was playing with it. And after we got a location from George and then 3 locations from Wagner Carr, I was playing with the template, and you know, there's no scale on the template. You just get this design. Well, I found out the scale, and the template was actually a real template. And I thought, how could the Knights of the Golden Circle do all this? And, you know, over the years, and this wasn't overnight, this took years to figure a lot of it out. I found the scale and the dimensions of the template, and then playing with it, I found out it tiles like floor tiles. You can lay it down over a map, and it just keeps going on like a grid pattern. And you know, it's like there's 3 templates, a large, medium, and small. They all connect with one another, and when you form it in a grid pattern, you can lay it over the U.S. or as big. You could lay it over the globe if you wanted, but I know it ties in with treasures across the Americas, Mexico, United States, and Canada. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but I found out the dimensions and all of this. And then I started, you know, I laid out the template in a grid system, and I noticed it lined up with other sites of alleged treasures. And not only that, but historical sites, sites of, well, mysterious historical sites like the Los Lunas Decalogue Stone in New Mexico. And then I found out, you know, as I extended it, the Kensington Runestone that Scott Wolter is famous for, the Hooked X, and yep, you know, all of his work. And the interest, when I came across all of that, I remembered, you know, I used to watch Scott Wolter's shows, and I was very fascinated by him. I loved his shows, and it was amazing to me. And when I found that it lined up with one of a site that he was famous for, it just blew my mind. And
I've read the book, just so you know. I've read the Hooked X. We're friends. I've been to his forensic lab. So yeah, I'm very familiar with that last book he just came out with. It's pretty brilliant.
And it's amazing. And it even lined up with the Newport Tower in Rhode Island. Yep. And it amazed me. And I thought, how does this template line up with all this, including the what was that? A Victoria Peak. It was a treasure that had been recovered by a man named Doc Noss. Actually, he tried to recover most of it, but was shot in the back of the head at some point. And nobody knows exactly. Well, they claim it was an unscrupulous business partner who shot him in the back of the head. And then it's alleged, nobody knows what happened to the rest of the treasure. The government claims they didn't get it, even though they're the ones who expanded the boundaries of the White Sands Missile Range to include Victoria Peak, and there's a lot of accounts of the military going in and out of the mountain, even building a road up to it. So I would imagine our government got it, but that's they claim they didn't, and others claim they did. That's a long story, but